Our honored guests at the Gala Farewell tonight are 40 former members of the company who've come from east and west halfway around the world. They will be introduced by Ozzie Hawkins, for 26 years, himself a principal artist here, and for the past 4 of those, our executive stage manager. Then they will take a gallant final bow before the great gold curtain falls for the last time. To make the order of the evening as little complicated as possible, our honor guests are being introduced in alphabetic order. And the head of the list, in so many other ways as well, she's been first so many times we can't even begin to enumerate them, is Marian Anderson. We're going to hear her in a great passage from the only opera she ever sang at the Metropolitan, A Masked Ball. Next comes the greatest basso buffo of his time, Salvatore Baccaloni. What a scene stealer he was, as Dr. Bartolo, Don Pasquale, and the sacristan in Tosca. And he backed up his comic gifts with a voice that Toscanini used on every possible occasion. He acted with his voice, Olin Downs wrote, which seems to me about as much as you can say for an opera singer. Baccaloni longed to do serious parts, and we had a glimpse of what he'd be like when he did the malevolent Geronte in Manon Lescaut. He was pure evil. Giuseppe Bambushek, who was musical secretary under Mr. Gatti, and was on duty that fearful night in Brooklyn when Caruso began to spit blood on the stage. Rose Bampton came to the Metropolitan as a mezzo-soprano. Midway in her career, she became a soprano. And we're going to have to break our alphabetic order to tell you the record we're going to play you is conducted by her husband, Wilfrid Pelletier. Maestro Pelletier came here in 1917 while he was still in his teens and had an illustrious career, particularly in the French repertoire. He and Miss Bampton give us Marguerite's haunting air from The Damnation of Faust by Berlioz, D'amour l'ardente flamme. Before he came to the Metropolitan, Richard Bonelli was heard in what's said to be the first opera broadcast from the stage over a radio network, a scene from Faust in Chicago, January 21st, 1927. His Metropolitan debut was in Traviata with Poncel and Schipa, and he was a stellar baritone here for 12 seasons. Opera kept Karen Branzel so busy, she had no time for concerts. And it was not until 21 years after her Metropolitan debut that the great contralto really emerged as a recitalist. This afternoon, we're going to hear Madame Branzel not as Brangöna or Azucena or Delilah, but as a leader singer in Franz Schubert's Der Tod und das Mädchen, Death and the Maiden. John Brownlee was Rudolph Bing's Don Giovanni at the Glyndebourne Festival before either of them came to the Metropolitan. He's having a second career, and a highly successful one, as director of the flourishing Manhattan School of Music. The first Sophie at the Metropolitan was Anna Case. She left after 10 years to become the wife of Clarence Mackey, head of Postal Telegraph and a director of the Metropolitan. She and her stepdaughter, Mrs. Irving Berlin, are box holders. And the record we're going to hear, Handel's classic Cari Selve, will demonstrate to an audience that never heard her that Anna Case's voice was as bright as her famous emeralds. Mario Chamley is a tenor we're going to have to do a whole program on one day. And here again, we have to break the order. To tell you, his wife, Ruth Miller, was a Metropolitan's opera soprano and is here tonight. The Chamleys teach in California, and one of their pupils is a bright name on the Metropolitan roster today, Mary Costa. Eugene Conley also teaches singing at North Texas State University, and Nadine Connor, with whom he often sang, retired at the height of her career to live in California with her altogether lovable family. Richard Crooks we're saving until later, but here's Vilma Georgiou, the unforgettable little Enold in Peleas and Melisande, up from Washington. Herta Glatz, who came here first with the Salzburg Opera Guild, is married to Dr. Fritz Redlich, chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at Yale University School of Medicine. Music and medicine always went together. Nanette Guilford is given to a variety of good works, from Girl Scouts to musical therapy. And dear Frederick Jägel is head of the Department of Singing at New England Conservatory of Music. Helen Jepson, how we all fell in love with her on the old Paul Whiteman hour. And then when we saw her blonde beauty the first time, the crush became a passion. She hasn't sung for some time and is working in speech therapy in New Jersey. Raoul Jobin, he of the sturdy tenor, is director of the Conservatoire de Musique et d'Art Dramatique in his native Quebec. Alexander Kipnis is teaching singing in Connecticut. May he one day come up with a bass to approach his own. Here he is in the beginning of the Good Friday spell from Parsifal, recorded in Wagner's own theater at Bayreuth nearly 40 years ago, with Wagner's son, Siegfried, conducting. Charlie Kuhlman is another tenor who rates a program of his own. Toscanini's Walter and Meistersinger at Salzburg, Bruno Walter's tenor in Das Lied von der Erde. He's on the faculty at Indiana University's Lively School of Music. Marjorie Lawrence has been on leave from her post as director of the Opera Workshop at Southern Illinois University and is interrupting a world tour to be with us tonight. Last month, she sang a concert in her native Australia before 100,000 people who rose as one man to greet her. When Marjorie Lawrence sang Salome at the Metropolitan, it was in German. But on the record we're going to hear, it's in French, just as Oscar Wilde wrote it, voluptuous, decadent. The final scene of Strauss's Salome and Marjorie Lawrence. There's been no greater moment in modern opera than that in the first act of Der Rosenkavalier, when Lotte Lehmann, as the Marschallin, looks into her mirror and says goodbye to her youth and love. It plumbs the depth of a woman's soul. Vincent Sheehan said Madame Lehmann was like the Chinese empress who commanded the flowers to bloom. Only for Lotte, they did. Harold Schoenberg said it more directly. She inspired love. Another former Metropolitan Opera singer who's on the excellent faculty of Indiana University in Bloomington is Martha Lipton. Her mezzo was dark and sweet and solid as a chocolate bar. Caruso's successor in the heroic tenor roles from the Italian and French repertoire was Giovanni Martinelli, and here he is in Samson's exhortation to his enslaved brethren from Samson and Delilah. Edith Mason has a lovely villa in the Italian Alps, but winters in Chicago. She was Toscanini's Nanetta and Falstaff in Salzburg, and she came back to the Metropolitan after 18 years to sing Marguerite opposite Charles Kuhlmann when he made his debut in Faust. It's another French opera we're going to hear her in today, Louise, and her voice was like a glass of cool water on a hot summer day. Nina Morgana, in private life, is Mrs. Bruno Zirato. Mr. Zirato was Caruso's secretary and later manager of the New York Philharmonic. She was born in Buffalo and sang at La Scala before she came to the Met, and she often gave joint recitals with Caruso. Patrice Munsell and Ira Petina forsook us for light opera, although Pat established herself as the most adorable soubrette in the world right on this stage, as Adele in Fledermaus, as Perry Cole, as Despina in Così fan tutte. It's too bad Ira never recorded anything from Magdalena, that sprightly score of Hector Villa-Lobos, but here she is in her biggest hit, Song of Norway, which Robert Wright and Chet Forrest adapted from the music of Edvard Grieg. The song's called Now. Now, now, not tomorrow, but now, I'll have my heart's desire. Now, now, never mind about how, I'll pay the piper's hire.
Love, love, how I come to you now, but all these cheats did nothing yours. No, no, not forever, but now I'm yours.
And it must be more than chance that places Ira Patina next to Lily Pons tonight. Who can ever forget Patina as the old crone at the spinet playing an hilarious accompaniment to Pons in The Daughter of the Regiment? Once at a gala forerunner of tonight, Lily was carried on stage as a bottle of champagne. The cellophane was ripped off, and she gave forth with a wine of rare sparkle and vintage the bell song from Lakme. And there hasn't been a Lakme at the Metropolitan since Lily Pons left.
Toscanini called Elizabeth Redberg the greatest living soprano. Grove's dictionary says there was no finer Aida in her generation. And here she is, Elizabeth Redberg, the gray-eyed, the golden, in Ritorna Vincitor.
Delia Regal, the regal Elizabeth of Valois in Don Carlo on Mr. Bing's first opening night. Stella Roman is coming on from Hollywood to be part of the festivities. And Bidou Sayar, we are going to hear in a work she never sang here, Johnny Schicchi, the third of Puccini's triptych, which had its world premiere on this stage. An unforgettable mezzo who has become Madam Impresario. Reza Stevens and Michael Manuel are co-general managers of the Metropolitan Opera National Company, which will be in Chicago next week, and ends its first and highly successful transcontinental tour in Mexico in June. Last week, the Metropolitan announced a new Carmen for its second season in the new Opera House, 1967-68. We haven't had a Carmen since Reza sang here. And here she is, for all time, with Fritz Reiner, who conducted the great production of Carmen, which Mr. Bing presented in his second season, staged by Tyrone Guthrie. All the way from her hilltop just outside Florence comes Gladys Swarthout again to the scene of so many of her triumphs. Within the past year, her great performance of the Berlioz Romeo and Juliet with Toscanini has been released on records. And here is Juliet, young, eager, at the ball of the Capulets. Miss Swarthout.
Heureuse enfant, ô mire de flamme, lié d'amour par le hasard de ce regard. Vivant tous deux d'une seule âme, cachés le bien sous l'ombre bleue, ce petit vent qui vous embrase, c'est pure extase que ces paroles sont de
Of course, not everyone's here we'd hoped would be. Rosa Poncell, Maria Yeritza, Geraldine Farrar. From her home in Connecticut, Miss Farrar wrote me such a charming invitation from Lauder, that's Lauder Greenway, chairman of our board, to be present on the 16th. Alas, the conditions conspire to regrets. I'm counseled to avoid emotion, so I shall embarrass no one, least of all such a host. But I shall be present in spirit and with a full heart. From Maria Yeritza, a beautiful letter. Dearest friends in the audience and on the stage, I pay tribute to the greatest opera house in the world, our beloved Metropolitan. My heartfelt wishes and prayers go now to the new opera house with this glorious company. God bless you all. And now, I haven't forgot, I promised you Richard Crooks. When the Russians came to us the first time, we found they had a charming way of applauding the audience at the end of a performance. Today, let us applaud you. When Madame Lehman retired, she told the public, "You were the wings on which I soared." And today we're going to close on this, our last broadcast from the old house, by greeting you, and in the best possible way, with Robert Franz's lovely song, Widmung, Dedication, sung by Richard Crooks. Oh, thank me not for songs I bring thee. Thine were they all, no gift of mine. Song came from thee. I but return thee, whatever was and will be thine.
Oh, thank